a much underestimated subject today. As Paul has said, the impact of selling your firm on various different stakeholder groups, and the impact potentially on you of not getting that management of stakeholders right, and the risk it can potentially put into a deal process. We'll look at 8 different stakeholder groups in turn. So firstly, founder shareholders, probably the instigators of the sale, and maybe most of you on the call today fall into that category. Then we'll look at senior shareholders, and let's say those senior shareholders might have, say, more than 10% of the business each. Some smaller shareholders, so those who are sub 10%. The rest of the staff, consultants, support staff, who may not have any share in the company. Very important clients and prospects, how we manage that particular group. Suppliers, not the guy who delivers the mail, right, but those maybe where you've subcontracted some of your consulting work, or maybe even subcontracted your back office. Family and friends, and then the last but by no means least important, the potential buyer stroke investor, both those who won and maybe those who missed out on the opportunity. We'll look at the both positive and negative impacts on each of these groups. So let's take a look at shareholders first. This could be possibly your most financially important decision you've ever made, and because of that, it needs planning perfectly in order to make it happen. You know, you might say that I would say this, but you probably should get some help. I mean, we're clearly in the business of helping people sell their consulting firms, but frankly, whether you engage us or you engage somebody else, you really should get some help. You're probably, like most of the clients we come across, in that sort of Johari window situation where you don't know what you don't know. Because frankly, selling your business services to clients is a completely different task to selling a consulting firm to a potential buyer. It's far more complicated. There are far more variables involved, many things that can actually trip it up along the way. And you probably, the majority of you, don't have experience of doing that, and so it's new for you. It's like as if someone threw you a set of keys for a car and you'd never driven a car before, and you probably wouldn't just get into the driver's seat and take off. You'd probably look for an instructor. And some people liken this wrongly to selling a house. It's not like selling a house. Selling a house is a much simpler task, and the implications of getting it wrong are that you just don't sell your house, but the house is probably in the same state that it was when you started to sell it. That's not the same with selling a consulting firm. You can do real damage to the business if you get it wrong. So do look out there and try and find some help to take you through this journey. The second thing that's important, I think, about founder shareholders is this is somewhat of an emotional roller coaster, right the way from beginning to end. And if you take it from me that this is a process that will go on, if you include the thinking about it beforehand, the engaging people to help you go through the process, and then the process itself, there's probably at least a year's worth of activity there. It's a long journey, and during the course of that journey, there'll be some real highs, and there'll be some real lows. Right? You know, I've never yet been involved in a deal process, and I've probably been involved in 40 or 50 of them now, where people don't go through some real lows along the way, and you've got to be able to manage that whilst at the same time staying focused on the day job. Out of 100 firms that we might start to sell, typically about 75% of those sell the first time round, and the 95% reason why the other 25% don't sell the first time round is because they were growing nicely when they started the process, and for many reasons, one of which could be that the founders lost sight of the day job and concentrated too much on the process itself. The business started to flatline, or in worst case situations started to decline. And I can tell you from bitter experience that you just can't sell a business if it's flatlined or it's declining. All buyers want to buy the hope of the future, and that has a lot to do with growth. And certainly if you're to receive a decent price for your firm, and I assume you do, then you've got to have a growing business when it's sold. So you've got to stay focused on keeping business coming in through the door. And of course, that's another reason why you might like to get some help on this, so that it's practical to actually stay focused on the day job. So plan and execute to perfection is what it's all about. The next group we'll look at is senior shareholders, and as I mentioned, take these as being, say, people who've got more than 10% of the shareholding in the firm. For them, this is like you, a life-changing money event, right, if the deal succeeds, right? You could be talking about large sums of money that are suddenly made available for these individuals. And so you've got to get them invested into the process and get them to understand what good looks like. And I recommend to all the sort of founders of companies that go through a sale to sit down with every one of those that are going to be involved in the sale process, that are aware of the sale process, and that are likely to gain from the sale process, to really understand what good looks like for them individually. If you're a good advisor, one of the things they'll do up front is go through and understand the likely price that you're going to get for the firm, right? It may be a small range of price, but that will enable you to be able to work out what each individual might get out of the sale. And you need to sit down with those individuals and ensure that that's sufficient to get them invested into the process, and look at them in the whites of their eyes and make sure that they're on board with the journey ahead. Because it's absolutely important that you have everybody on the same page. Part of that might be working out who's going to go after the deal and who's going to stay with the business, and it may well be in amongst the founder group. There are some people that may wish to leave, and in fact that might be one of the motivations for going through a sale process in the first place. You've got to be absolutely clear right up front who's staying as who's going, and that story mustn't change during the course of a deal. One of the things that will scare a buyer away is if that story changes, and of course it's got to be credible. So the only people who are likely to be able to leave at the when a deal closes are those people where the business has no dependency on them any longer, and you have to orchestrate that situation and make that real. So be very clear about that, who's staying and who's going. Making sure that those who are staying are locked into the next couple of years after the deal closes is important as well. Most deals in this sector have some earn-out associated with it. The earn-out might be dependent upon just staying with the business. It might be contingent upon some financial performance criteria. And yes, there is an increasing trend to less and less earn-outs as savvy buyers have worked out that gets in the way of creating synergies in between what they've bought and their business. However, if you assume from the beginning that there is an earn-out, then you won't be disappointed, and it will get your thinking along the lines of making sure that key individuals are locked into the earn-out. And that might be because they've only received 50% of the money up front, and therefore they'll only get the remaining 50% if they stay with you during the deal process. There may be other ways of locking them in, but you need to make sure that they're locked into that period of earn-out. After that, of course, all hose are off, and then it will depend on how good the new home is as to whether people wish to stay with it or not going forward. But clearly the earn-out, from the perspective of getting all of your money out, is absolutely critical. Managing their time and deal contribution tightly is key as well. You know, it's the same point with you, really, that you've got to keep the business going. So people who are senior shareholders often are those self-same people who are out there winning business for you, and you're going to make sure they concentrate on keeping the business coming in and not spend too much time on the deal process. Smaller shareholders, for them it's slightly different. This might not be life-changing money. It might be sufficient to pay off the mortgage or pay off some debts, credit cards or something. And on the positive side, beyond that, it might be about improving career prospects. But you know, it's fair to say that the people who earn the least out of the deal are the ones who are most vulnerable, and it may well be that some of those are critical to the post-deal success. So there's a few things to do before you go into a deal process, and first of all, I guess making sure that those people who are critical to the business in either the sale itself or post the sale are actually sufficiently vested. So looking at the spread of your shareholding and making sure that it fits the contribution of the individuals is key. You've clearly got to manage rumours of a sale, right? And you know, there's no hard and fast rules on this as to whether just you as founders or the broader management team or everybody in the company knows about the sale process. We've got something like about 25 consulting firm sales in process at the moment. And out of those 25, only one of them I can think of is where the entire company knows the business is up for sale. In most cases, it's that the information is kept to a relatively small group and loosely, I would say, represented by founders and those senior shareholders who at some stage during the process are likely to be wanting to be seen by the buyer. You know, if you keep the number to a relatively small number, the chances of a rumour getting out into the community at large is smaller. But you've got to have a plan as to how you manage rumours if they come out. And our general advice for people is to say, if somebody comes to you from the staff and says, you know, I've heard the business is for sale, you know, the best answer is, well, the business is always for sale, right? We're always getting approaches. We're a successful business, and that means that people come to us all the time. So you're not telling a lie. You're not telling them it's not for sale, but you're not giving them the indication that something's underway and it's in process and something's likely to happen tomorrow. Of course, at some stage, that's going to have to be visible to the entire staff, but you need to be sure that you've got a deal on the cards before that's let out, and that's probably, you know, in the last week or two of the overall process. So planning your timing of those communications is key, and you know, and also making sure that, for example, buyers don't get access to the staff at large, right, until we're right towards the end of the process, where pretty much all of the due diligence is done and the deal is really, you know, 99% likely to happen. Everybody in the business, right, in terms of shareholders is important to look at individually in this. And if you go on to the next category, which could be the majority, I'd say in most of the clients we sell, the majority of the staff don't have shares. And for them, you know, this can be a career changing event. It could be lots of opportunities for them in the new home. But of course, fear of the unknown is probably what would be at the forefront of people's mind if they knew about it too early on. And we generally take the view that there's no point in telling the majority of the people that there's a sale underway, because it might not happen. What's the point in creating fear of the unknown if something's not going to happen? Of course, when you're 98 or 99% sure that a deal will happen, it's a different situation, and you need to plan a communication to everybody appropriately. But do be aware that all of your staff are vulnerable, right, when a sale happens. You know, if somebody's come from PwC or IBM, for example, to your smaller business, and the reason they came there is because they didn't like PwC or IBM, and suddenly you've sold back to them, you know, some people might not like that, all right? So you've got to create a positive out of this for all of the community, and make sure that they see the positive and the upside of this. The vast majority of people after a sale sorry, my screen is telling me something here. Hang on.
Your screen is fine from our perspective, Paul.
Is it okay from your end? It just must be my computer then.
Absolutely fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Paula, for that. So you must understand that there is vulnerability there, right? And you will have to, you know, tell the upside of the story, right, where all of the staff are concerned. You know, do take the opportunity leading into a sale process to release some of the poor performers, right? It may well be that you've lived with poor performance in some of your staff for quite some time. You know, the time to get rid of them and then lose those people, right, is prior to a sale process. So you know, there's a you know, a focus on that for people coming into a sale. You may, with some people, need to incentivize some loyalty during the transition. If you've got a period of 1 or 2 years, then, you know, do look at incentivizing loyalty during the transition of the earn-out. It may not be for everybody, but for some people you may need to do that. Clients and prospects. You know, clearly you're hoping that clients should gain from synergy with the buyer. I think it's fair to say that buyers generally are very rarely...
Paul, just to let you know,
yes.
Paul, that we aren't seeing your current slide, so we're still seeing the rest of the staff slide.
Okay. Okay. then this thing is giving me a problem. Let me just see if I can fix it. So excuse me for this. Just hang on 1 second.
If not, Paul, we could potentially, I could bring it up on my screen and then make me I'll move the slides forward for you.
Let me just bring it back up and
right.
see.
That's looking better.
Well,
we can see now.
Can you see clients and prospects now?
We can indeed, yes.
Jolly good. We're on the right slide then. Okay. So yes, you're hoping that clients and prospects are going to benefit from going with your buyer. And as I say, whilst buyers are rarely interested in your financials, that's not what attracts you in the first place. What attracts them, right, is your access to clients, access to markets. It may be that you have different service lines that they would like to offer to their clients. It may be that you represent a new geography for the buyer. And all of that should be beneficial where your clients and prospects are concerned. However, again, potential fear of the unknown. So you've got to mitigate leak risk during the course of a process. You don't really want your competitors out there using the fact that they know you're in the marketplace to sway clients in their direction. And all I can say on this is that, you know, in 50 deals or so now, we've never had a problem where this is concerned. It's rightly that you should be concerned about it. But the corporate development departments who manage M&A activity in all of the buyers that we deal with are very professional organizations. They tend not to be the line management that you might deal with in partnership situations in the buyer. And they know that if they are known to people like us as a leaky sieve, right, then they're not likely to get opportunities put to them. So managing the process with diligence and making sure that information doesn't get out into the marketplace is actually one of the most important things we do when we get involved in a sale process. Clearly, managing the communications when the sale has happened, right, is key, and that needs to be managed very carefully. You may have novation clauses in your contracts with clients. That means that you've actually got to ask their permission before you sell to the buyer, and we've had some examples of that. I can say in every case there's never been an issue, and it would only likely to be the case if your buyer happened coincidentally to be a huge competitor of one of your clients, which is possibly unlikely. So make it a positive message for both clients and the buyer, and also restrict buyer contact with clients until right towards the end of the process. We wouldn't entertain, if we were managing a deal, buyers getting involved with clients until the last week or two in due diligence, right? And by then, hopefully the deal is pretty much done. Suppliers, and I said, you know, this is, you know, maybe people you've subcontracted client work to, maybe people who you've contracted the back office to in your business. You know, they're important to you, and you need to make sure that you manage them as well. So plan well when to tell them, not too soon, because there's no point in telling them until you know the detail of what will happen, and make sure they get their house in order. Of course, there's a potential big upside for your suppliers in this new big home that you found yourself in now. So helping them to get their house in order, making sure that the buyer understands the economies of scale that may be associated with your subcontractors is all part of that, and you know, another community that you need to manage well. Family and close friends, something that people forget about completely. But I can tell you from my own personal experience of selling my consulting firms before Equiteq that that roller coaster I mentioned earlier hits your family just as much, if not more, than you do. You are likely to be very distracted by this entire process, and if they felt they didn't see much of you before you got involved in the sale process, it'll be even less during it. So I think focusing on the life beyond the deal, and getting family and friends to understand that things will be a lot better when the deal is finished is about the only advice I can give here, because it will be tough during the deal process for both of those communities. and managing expectations as well. Try not to get too distracted by the financial side of this and what that might mean for you and your family. It could be a big deal for you. It could be life-changing, but don't mentally spend the money until it's in the bank, I guess is the best advice there. And do make sure you try and keep your friends through all of this. It can be difficult, but you'll need them later down the path, I can assure you. You only need one buyer, but you may end up speaking to 50 to 100 buyers before you find the one that's right for you. So there's going to be a lot of losers in there, and you really don't want to make sure you burn any bridges, because that roller coaster I mentioned along the way, you may not know who the final buyer is until quite a long way into the process. And so you need to treat everybody with respect and professionalism, and make sure that they're looked after as well. It may well be also, we've had this many times, that you come across buyers during the process that may end up not being the eventual winner of your company, but may end up becoming partners further down the line. So there are lots of potential side benefits from being introduced to a lot of companies who are in the same sort of line of business as you. Those that lose, make sure that you inform them in the right way. I mean, it's fair to say in this game that no one ever comes third, but there are a lot of seconds out there, people who fall in second place, and make sure that they know that it was a close run thing, and that you really respected what they had to offer, etc., etc. For the one that won, get to know them. Really do get to know them as quick as you can, both at a personal level, socially, and obviously in business, right? But the sooner you do that, the faster any integration benefits will accrue to the business. Paula, back to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to those of you who have sent in questions. We're going to try and answer as many as we possibly can. So first, Paul, someone has posted a question which is very interested in your opinions on when and how to discuss a proposed placement on the market with mid-management and with broader staff, and how to perform an in-depth assessment of the firm's value without spooking management and staff.
Okay. Well, the first part of that question, I would generally leave it as late as possible, right? So strangely, despite the fact that you're involved in selling a people business, most buyers don't really want to know much more or see or talk to much more than the senior team, and take that as being a number of people less than 10. So very rarely do buyers want to go beyond that group. They make their decision based on the information that's provided to them on paper, by talking to the top team in the organization, which could be between 2 or 3 people or 10 people, and maybe doing some referencing in the outside world. And frankly, we don't believe there's any point in talking to the rest of the organization until you're sure you've got a deal, and that's quite close towards the end of the process. There's always exceptions to this rule, and as I mentioned before, we do have one client where the entire business knows, and for their culture, that was right. And they talked about this potential for a long, long time, and it's nothing of a surprise to them. It's being managed in terms of the communication with everybody very well. But the problem is that everybody knows in the business that the business is for sale, and there's a reasonable chance that others outside the business will find out as well, and potentially that can backfire against you in a competitive situation. So try not to do that. From a valuation point of view, companies like Equiteq, and I'm sure there are others, can go through a process of valuing your business. We actually don't need to come on site. I mean, the one good thing about consulting businesses is that actually you don't really differentiate through your offices, so we don't really need to see the office if that's a sensitive issue, and if we do, we might be able to see it on a Sunday. But it doesn't. All the work we do doesn't need to have to go anywhere near your sites, and we probably only need to talk to 2 or 3 people in the business in order to come up with a 90–95% accurate valuation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. How do you ensure that senior stakeholders are properly vested in the sale? For instance, how many shares should they have?
Gosh, that's a big question, and I guess every situation is somewhat different. But my general view on this is that the founders of the business, it's not unusual for them to have 70-75% of the shareholding between them when a company sells, and for the remaining 25-30% to be spread in amongst the senior management team. And when I say the senior management team, I mean those who are really contributing to value increase. So really ask yourself the question hard, is this person adding to value in the business, right? Or are they just a consultant like many other consultants that you could hire? And they tend to be people who get shares, who are either in a business development situation winning new business, or they're managing large client engagements and growing and managing those clients going forward, or potentially they're in a situation of either managing aspects of the firm, right? So it's not untypical to see, say, a functional person like a finance director have some shares in the firm, or they could be people who are significant to you in terms of developing intellectual property in the firm. So they tend to be the sorts of individuals who get shares, and by the time your firm sells, if it was started by 1 or 2 or 3 founders, maybe a quarter of the shares are out with the non-founder group.
I think we've got time for one more question. Someone has asked, why should buyers not get access to the staff until near the end of the deal? I think you mentioned it earlier in your presentation.
Yeah, it's just a risk from a risk perspective, both in terms of internal fear of the unknown in amongst the staff. This is looking at it from your perspective, yeah, as a seller. So it's, you know, you create concern in amongst the staff, right? If buyers have access to, say, even a small number of staff, and also potentially the news can leak outside the organisation if more people are aware of the sale, and that may be dangerous to you in the marketplace. From a buyer perspective, I've never had a buyer ask to talk to beyond that top team. And it consistently surprises me that we don't get asked. If we did get asked, we would fend it off for the reasons I've just mentioned, but it very rarely happens. We just don't get that question asked.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I think that's all that we have time for, so thank you for listening, and the podcast will be available within 24 hours, and we'll be sending you a link so that you can access it again. If we didn't have time to answer your question, we will get back to you individually, so we will definitely respond to questions. If you aren't already a member, then I would urge you to join Equiteq Edge. It's our resource for insight, advice and unique research, all aimed at helping you to successfully sell and prepare your business for sale. You can join it free from our website. We already have 4,000 members. It's updated several times a week, so please do make the most of it. And finally, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you very much, Paul, for your presentation.
Thanks again from me for joining us. Bye-bye now.